God, I love that intro. What is up, my butts and mashers? It's Nateslegend here, of course. Today, we are joined by Doodles. We got Scott here today. It's just the two of us for now. Jay is planning to join us. We'll see if he can get on here just when he gets a few moments. But we'll bring him on as soon as he's available. But for now, Doodles, how you doing, man? What's new with you? How you holding up?
Oh, I'm great. Not much new. How about yourself?
Oh man, it's been insane. So this is one of our recorded episodes here today. So I don't want to necessarily say too much about what's new. We're kind of in a bit of a limbo on this one, but it's been good. We lots of video games, lots of time to play. Been able to sit down and play. It's been nice. So
Oh yeah.
right, but today's going to be a good one. Just the two of us today, like I said. But it's a big episode. We are talking. We're gonna kind of dip our toes. We're not gonna get too deep into the entire lore because eventually we'll do a whole segment on it. But today we're gonna be talking Zelda. Really, we got Link in the mix here, but very specifically, we're talking Hyrule Warriors. Let's see. Let me pull here a couple things for us. But Hyrule Warriors 2. You just started playing this yourself, yeah?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Me and my wife have been playing it for solid. We've been binging it.
Been binging it. All right. Well, okay. So let's talk Hyrule Warriors again. Just jumping right into things today. We don't we won't lollygag our way through it. So Hyrule Warriors 2. It is the second installment, Age of Calamity. It was developed by Omega Force and released for the Switch on November 20th, 2020. So a little bit of an older game. It does take place. So Age of Calamity takes place about 100 years before the events of Breath of the Wild, and it is a direct sequel to Nintendo's 2014. Hyrule Warrior, just direct sequel there. Now, I did not have an opportunity to play this game myself. I watched Hyrule Warrior, some gameplay there with some people that no longer around, but I was able to watch it. What? Tell me about this game. What sets the Hyrule Warriors game apart from a normal Zelda game or Link game, whatever else? What sets this apart, Doodles?
Well, so this one, it really strays from your standard Zelda game where you're just playing as Link. You can actually play as some of his friends, and you just have the opportunity to see what each character is willing to do in combat, like what able to do. And it's a lot of fun. It's pretty immersive, and the more you get into the game, the more it surprises you with who you get.
Fair enough. Well, you know what? Actually, I suppose before we get too far here, we totally skipped something. Now, I asked you a question as always at the beginning before we started recording here. It's a very, very loaded question today, guys. So we're gonna take some time to really think about this one. But Doodles, what is the best Legend of Zelda game and why? Go.
I'm gonna go with Breath of the Wild. Is my favorite because
why is that?
It's the most beautiful game that I've seen in a long time. As far as landscape and just the full world, it's impressive. And in open world Zelda, you can't really go wrong. And it's just true. I would say the combat is really, really great. And the use of your tools that you get with the Sheikah Slate is pretty cool.
All right. So Breath of the Wild, we have Breath of the Wild 2 coming up here as well. What are you hoping to get out of Breath of the Wild 2? How do we play and make your favorite version of this game better? What are you expecting?
You just keep going off of the series of events from Hyrule Warriors 2.
Okay.
You just keep building that story the way that they have progressed with what is supposed to be a prequel it's been awesome, and I highly recommend playing it. I don't want to spoil it for anyone. So
yeah, it's supposed to be a really big immersive gameplay. So we won't dive too deep into the gameplay of it. Maybe one of these other Zelda episodes, maybe we'll have a Zelda month or something where we just break down a few. But nonetheless, I have all these ideas for us, but we'll cross that bridge if and when we get there. For now, I'm gonna go ahead. I'll answer as well. I love your answer, but I would have to argue for nostalgia's sake. Now I'm debating if I want to go with Ocarina of Time or Majora's Mask. But I think I'm gonna lean Ocarina of Time. It was the first Zelda game I ever played. It holds a lot of memories for me. I think that's me. The big one is for memory's sake, I would have to say.
I think the majority of the fan base would agree with you on that one.
Yeah. It feels like a cop-out answer, and I apologize, but Zelda has never really been one of my my strong suits. I never really got into Nintendo as a whole. I'm sure if you guys recall from the Pokemon discussion we had during the Arkham Knights episode, Nintendo's not my forte. It's not my preference. I don't know what it is. I haven't been able to get into them the same way, and I don't know what it is. So as someone that does, I have a Switch, so as someone that plays the Switch quite a bit there, Doodles, what would you recommend I try to get me more into the Legend of Zelda series?
Hyrule Warriors 2, I would say. Yeah, definitely.
Start there.
It's great. If you have a chance, play through Breath of the Wild first.
Okay.
Because it will flip your lid. But the Hyrule Warriors 2 Age of Calamity it's been awesome. As someone who was outside of the game series, I never played them growing up. It was really great to introduce me to the lore through that.
Okay, and that's fair. So let's talk gameplay for a second, because it will kind of segue in directly to what you're referencing there. So let's talk gameplay for a moment. When I first started watching others play the Hyrule Warriors, to me it didn't really come across as a Zelda game. Yeah, you had the characters, but it felt more of a board game type situation where you have these different sectors that you're trying to take over. You go, you fight, you take over the sector, you move to the next one. You're basically playing chess, trying to move your way to the end circle or end square there. Yeah. And it felt more of a board game type feel than it did story progression. How do they use that type of gameplay, the board game? I keep referring to board game, but the board game type gameplay, how do they progress that into a story?
So it goes along with their use of the cutscenes.
Okay.
They really delve into what you're doing and why you're doing it. So I would say the gameplay is the board style gameplay when you're capturing these zones. As you progress, it just gets harder and harder, which is what you expect. But
of course,
your characters start to become more and more, developed and overpowered eventually.
All right.
And you have all sorts of RPG aspects where you can upgrade your character.
Okay. I didn't know that. I didn't know it was RPG style. Go ahead. Tell us more.
Yeah, you can fuse your weapons together to develop stats, and then they have booster stats that will actually really help you out. Like, for example, every 100 KOs you get like a 6% damage increase sometimes, or they'll have weapons where you'll increase your monster part drop rate, and it ends up being really cool. You play the game how you want to play it. You design your characters to be exactly what you want, and it's pretty immersive.
Okay, that's fair. Let's talk story then for a second, because if gameplay is the secondary to it, the style of play or whatever else is irrelevant to the actual story. So if that's the case, how does this story tie into the other games? I know, for example, you have some games that are kind of off in their own little world. Is this one of those games where it is off in its own little world and doesn't have any connection, or is it somehow tied? Sequel, prequel, whatever it is, to say Breath of the Wild or any of the others?
The closest comparison that I can give it, and can you put spoilers up, because I don't want to get in trouble.
No, I got you. Let's go ahead here. Let's throw some spoilers up there. So go ahead.
The closest comparison I can give you is a Infinity War Endgame scenario, and that is, I'm going to let you think on that. That's where I'm going to leave it. I can't do much more than that.
Endgame. Okay. So in
you're
what
basically
aspect? What are you referring to there? What do you
so
mean?
the big event. There's the big event in Breath of the Wild,
Okay.
where you're starting out, and the world is what it is. Ganon is, taken over, and it's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole premise is kind of like you're trying to avoid that.
Okay.
So that's
Okay.
where I'm at with it.
Okay, I guess that makes sense. Especially Endgame would be I guess that would be a fair comparison. The world is already destroyed. The world, things have already happened at this point. You're just kind of coming in to clean up the mess. I can see that.
Exactly.
So we're looking at the story there. Is it one that could be considered a prequel to some of the events in these other games, such as Breath of the Wild? Because, I mean, this does take place 100 years before. That would imply that this is something, they're tied together somehow. Now, obviously, with Link's age and whatnot, I don't know how that plays a role if it's 100 years, but how closely do they play hand in hand? Do you recommend playing them simultaneously or in succession?
So, I would say you need to. I would play Breath of the Wild, and then when you beat Breath of the Wild, play Age of Calamity.
Okay.
Hyrule Warriors, and then you'll understand after that point, because you're trying to avoid what's happening in Breath of the Wild. So
So are you?
It's a prequel, but you're kind of not. I mean,
so when you say you're trying to avoid, and now does this involve? And again, I haven't played this game. I'm just trying to, we'll try to pry a few things out of you here without spoiling as much as we absolutely can. Is this based off of the reason the way that we're trying to avoid what's happening in Breath of the Wild or whatever else? Now, is this? I'm trying to think the best way to kind of word this. Is it a time jump type situation where you're bouncing between time zones, or is it one where this just happens to take place 100 years in the future? It's an alternate timeline trying to prevent this, the Breath of the Wild timeline where it just happens to take place in that time, or are you teleported back? Are you traveling through time to try to change the events?
So for the majority of the characters, it's very linear. It's in time. It's a prequel, but for some characters, it's a bit of a kind of a time jump scenario. I would say
timeline situation.
I would kind of say that, yeah. Without giving too much away, I would say there's a little bit of a time hop, but it's not the way you would think. It's for certain characters, it's different.
Okay, that's fair. So, kind of moving back into the story a little bit here when it comes to you mentioned the cutscenes and it's very dependent on that. Now, how do they deal with the different enemies? So, like for example, we had our Arkham episode, and any of our others, our Valhalla episodes. We have this main antagonist. Really, is this one where you have to focus on one antagonist, or are there multiple storylines that are kind of playing out different bad guys that you have to fight against?
So there's one brooding antagonist type character that I would say, but there's others, I would say. You're dealing mostly with the enemies, just the standard monsters for the most part.
Whatever happens to be in front of you.
Yeah, but the way that the characters intermingle is kind of the entertaining part, I would say. Where you have Daruk and you have Urbosa and Mifa and Impa, and you have these characters that are all just tied together, and they all have their own stories.
Okay, so are you following on? So moving from the antagonist kind of to the protagonist, how is the story told? Is it told from a single point of view where you're following one character through this entire story and seeing the others' stories play out, or are you jumping between these different characters, learning their stories individually? And if that is the case, is it one character at a time, or are you actually bouncing between characters? Sorry, as I word vomit. Go ahead.
You're okay. You're able to play as who you want. You can pick your characters pretty much from the beginning.
Okay.
But as far as the story goes, you are generally with Link for the most part.
Okay. Fantastic.
You're with Link and you're with Zelda for the most part.
Okay.
But yeah, he has his friends, and you can play as them if you want. My personal favorite from the beginning was Impa.
Okay.
She is a lot of fun to play. She kind of teleports around, and she's super OP, I would say. Yeah.
All right, we'll have to check out gameplay, potentially, stream something like that along the way. But when it comes to the overall gameplay, so you said this one character feels a little overpowered. Is that affected by the RPG type style of this game, where you can modify your characters? Is it just that this character is overpowered, or can you modify her to become overpowered?
I say you can modify any of them to become pretty overpowered, but I mean, towards the end of the game, it levels out. Okay. I say OP very liberally. Loosely. It's a loosely used term for me, but they're just fun to play as. You have your character that becomes your favorite, and you can really zone out and just play that person for hours. And yeah, the way you have to attack certain enemies, it varies. Like you have different ways to beat some enemies. Some enemies are a little more difficult than others, but for example, I hate Lionels. Fair. They are truly awful, and they are the bane of my existence.
Hey, sometimes you got to do what you got to do, though. I mean,
fair.
I just describe this character. What makes them so terrible, though, to go against? Why do you hate them so much?
They're the most terrifying thing you could think of. It's a lion. Okay. It's a lion horse thing, and they're really, really strong, and they do a lot of damage, and they have the health bar of Dark Eater Midir from Dark Souls 3.
Ooh,
generally, they like to stay alive. That's the thing. And they don't want you to be.
That's always the worst part of video games. They just don't want you to be alive anymore. I mean, So, all right. So this game, being a part of the world, playing a small but crucial role potentially in the overall arc of especially Breath of the Wild, whatever else. How did they connect this game to the others and allow it to be its own gameplay, its own variety, while still maintaining the connection to these games? Do they just make it look the same, or how do they make that game feel different while at the same time play into the active story of Breath of the Wild? How do they accomplish that?
I would say you're playing as, you have all the stuff from Breath of the Wild with Link, but they've just added. They've added these characters, and I would say the characters are what make the game. The extra characters playing as them, it's a gift that keeps on giving the more you play it.
Fair. Okay.
So, the more you play, you'll get more people, and then the more people you have, it's just like, it's awesome.
So with it being a board game style gameplay, what type of strategy goes into actually winning the game, beating these maps or the levels or whatever else? What type of strategy do you have to implement compared to any other game? Like, is it a chess type strategy, or what do you have to do strategically?
There's a lot of divide and conquer, I would say. Okay. There's times where my wife and I, we would try to tackle the forts together, but some of them are on times. So it's every now and then, if it's a big enough map, we would just split up. Or and there's parts where they make you split up. If you're playing with a friend, you can you have to divide and just try to attack the forts by yourselves, and then eventually you can link up and fight together. But yeah, there's a lot of you're trying to separate and just capture everything as quickly as you can.
Okay. And that if that requires splitting up, I mean, that requires splitting up. That makes sense. Does it take away from the gameplay if you're not playing with the person you're playing with? You know, if you're not right there. Like, I mean, in Diablo, you and I have played plenty together, but I'm on one level, you're on another, or you're in a different portion of the map, taking on your own dudes. Splitting up can kind of take away from the story. How do you feel that the split up method plays with this particular game? Is it worth it?
Yeah, I would say it is. It's not as rewarding, I would say, if when you're by yourself fighting, because we run into that a lot with Diablo too. But when you're fighting, you know, with your friend and they're right next to you and you guys are fighting something together, it can be it's awesome, I would say. It's yeah, it can be, you can get in the zone and you guys are just like alternating attacks, and it just becomes really, it's just really fun.
Well, fantastic. I'm always one that likes to play with my friends. I mean, and so when it feels like, you know, if we're talking during the game, but like we're not near each other, you know, it's like, okay, what's the point of me playing this game with you? You know, like, right. So when I say that it can sometimes take away from or draw from the overall feel of the game, that's kind of what I'm worried about. So keeping that in mind, does the feeling of when you're fighting together, does that outweigh the overall feeling of, I don't want to say loneliness, but loneliness when you happen to be separated?
I would say you're more often than not together, so it's not too rough. But on certain maps, it can be challenging,
a little daunting. All right,
yeah.
That's fair. So last, I think we're going to keep this episode real short today. It looks like Jay may not be able to get here in time, and that's all right. We love Jay and we'll forgive him for it either way. But last, I'm hoping deep question for you. Okay.
All right.
It's kind of a two-parter, but how does this game carry the legacy of Legend of Zelda? And how can they continue to carry this? Say they create a third, or they could want to continue on with this path with this game, sequels, whatever else. How do they continue to carry that legacy while continuing to keep it its own feeling game?
That's a good question. I just say solid writing. Keep the writing up. You guys, they're killing it with the storyline. So fantastic. Just keep writing the way they're writing, and you know, keep us hooked.
That's always one of the biggest things that when it comes to video games and people creating them, like, you have to keep the story entertaining. I don't care. I'm gonna go on a tangent. Fuck it. Let's go. All right. Those games that require that you play by yourself, or that if you have a friend, you aren't near them. Like those, I'm trying to think of like a good example of these games where like you can't just dual screen or whatever else. But if you can't play with your friends, if you can't get on and actually enjoy this game together, you have to focus on the story. You know, because I'm not always going to get on and play with my friends. I'm not. I love you to death, Scott, but
it's not feasible.
It's just not feasible. I work random schedules compared to you. It's just not feasible. And maybe I'm mad at you one day and I don't want to play. Cool. I don't want to have to just not play this game. Like Rocket League, for example. That's one that I'm really thinking of. Like by myself, it's fine, but like that game, you have to play with other people. Oh right? Yeah. It's justifiable. Ooh, as I almost spill my water. I can justify a game like that, or hockey, or football, or whatever else. I can justify that one just being a multiplayer game.
Yes.
But Fortnite, Spellbreak, all of these games that Overwatch, their entire purpose is only to play online. Yeah. I don't fucking care. Exactly. I don't want to just play online. I want a story. I want to be able to play through this. So I love your take on that. You know, even though you can play with your buddies, the story is what's going to drive us, and it's going to be what we want. As much as, any future RPG Zelda games go, I don't care if we go MMO with them. I really don't. Stick with that story. So good call. Sorry, as I go off on my tangent, I kind of got distracted there for a moment. But
I completely agree.
Do you feel this game does ultimately carry that legacy, though? Is it worth the Legend of Zelda name?
Definitely. Yes, right. I would say it definitely deserves the name. It is, not only is it a great game, it was a great bonding experience for me and my wife to play together. So if you have, someone you want to play this game with, don't think about it, just do it. It's awesome.
I'll give Nintendo that much. I know I've never really been a big fan of them, and this actually might be why, but they are very family-oriented. Anybody can sit down and play any of their games, big, small, young, old. Anybody can sit down, and you can sit down and play with other people that aren't on the same caliber. Like, I'm very aware that I play video games better than my, 7-year-old nephew does. Like, I get it, but any of us can pick up these games and just play, and you're not, it brings people together. There's no skill requirement for some of these. So good on Nintendo. I definitely have to give them props on that one. Let's see, anything else here? I think that pretty much covers the Zelda side of at least the questions that I have concerning the game. We can get into the gameplay a little later on, but really break into the Zelda world. It is so expansive, though, at this point, with so many games, that I think we're gonna have to break them up individually like this, and we'll give Breath of the Wild 2 its own episode as well. Kind of maybe bring that in with Breath of the Wild and really discuss that, but I think that does it for the Zelda side of things. Doodles, where can our viewers find you? Where can they get in touch with you?
I'm on PlayStation, Doodly-doo. That's pretty much it.
Just on PlayStation right now. You looking? Yeah. I know we've kind of discussed it in past episodes. Are you looking to do any streaming of any kind here? Anything like that coming up?
Once things start to stabilize a little more, I can get out of current work I'm doing. That would be a more realistic idea.
We'll get you there. Again, this one's filmed definitely well in advance here. Kind of one of our backup episodes, JIC or whatever else. So, of course, things always change from here, and we always wish you the very, very best of luck. Hope things all work out for you there. Brings me into, however, our next piece of information. I'm going to throw this across the board. Now, first things first, always, we're going to throw this one across the board first. We got Pappy Reviews. Patrick Beatty is absolutely fantastic. He's the one that's responsible for all of this, for putting this together and allowing us to do this. So definitely give him a big shout out. Again, that's at Pappy Reviews and PatrickBeattyReviews.com. And, of course, Gaggle of Geeks, which is where you should be following and liked and subscribed so you can watch our show. So you should already know about that one. But Patrick really hooked us up here. We now have our own line. Just added to TeePublic. You can now buy official merch of the Gaggle of Geeks button mashing show. Please go check it out. Link across the bottom. We'll also make sure to include any links in the description below. I'm Nateslegend, though. You can catch me. I don't know if I'll have streamed for this particular episode, not knowing exactly when it will air, but you can catch me every Sunday. We're going to be streaming whatever show we plan to talk about. That's kind of the goal from my channel. So please go like that at Nateslegend. But, ladies and gentlemen, as always, please go get your mental health checked and keep gaming.